Hey, Aaron, welcome to the show. As a way of getting started, give us a little background on yourself.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Aaron Ansari, as you mentioned, and I am the VP of Sales for a company called Trend Micro. I'm of a product called Cloud One. I came to sales in a very untraditional sort of way, in the sense that I came to sales as a technologist. So I started my career and my level of understanding of sales as a buyer. And so one of the things that I did out of school was I got an engineering degree, computer science degree, and spent time coding and developing and building applications for financial services institutions. As I matured my career that way, I started to buy software from people at these financial institutions when people gave me enough responsibility to say, hey, evaluate this product for us. And what I saw was a need for a kind of a technical as well as personal sort of seller. And I sort of made the leap over from technologist to salesman back in 2010, maybe 2009, and have been loving it and doing it ever since.
And why'd you make the move?
Mostly because of the things that I was experiencing as a buyer was a lack of empathy, or a lack of people being in the seat that I was in. A lot of the sellers that came to me, said, oh, so-and-so's got this same problem and so-and-so's got that same problem. But they hadn't ever spent a day in my shoes, right? Yeah. Or in the buyer's role. And that became evident time and time and time again. And I sat there thinking, like, man, I've kind of got a personality that would allow me to sell. I thought at the time. Turns out I was right. And then two, I figured if I can get people to if I can get people to empathize with me the way that I want them to, I would be successful.
Yeah, and that seems to work quite a bit. I went that same route.
Right. I'm familiar. Yeah.
And, because especially when the problem isn't urgent, if the problem is kind of like latent or somewhat active and there's a bunch of ways to ignore it or solve it or do something for it, because the top down, the golfer, the traditional smile and handshake sales rep, the relationship only person can succeed. But when you're selling to other technical people, what is value? Value is telling them something they don't know.
Very relative. Yeah.
Yeah. And if the rep can't do that, what do they do?
Yep.
Introduce you.
Right. Exactly. And time again, I would see that traditional seller and sales engineer model, right? Like where somebody would come in and like, sort of be the canary, right? And get the meeting and then say, okay, here's my sales engineer to walk you through this. And what I'm finding and what I'm building is a hybrid, one person that can do both of those things, right? Have the empathy, be, deep enough technologically wise or within the technology to have a meaningful conversation with you, provide value, understand your problem. And like you say, be curious, right? Do the things that show that there's enough interest both ways to build that relationship.
And what was that like that first year?
It wasn't nearly as horrific or as scary as you would think it was. And as a point of fact, and a little bit of this was good timing. That first year I came into a company that was kind of the snowplow or the bleeding edge of a space, a new tech space in the technology. And a lot of people were very, very interested in it. And so it makes it nice when I was a user of that technology, right? So I had actually implemented a project at a financial services company, 2,000 people wide, not huge, but I'd actually implemented that software. And so to go in and say, look, I've already done this and I know what you're going to go through. And I know not all, but I know a lot of the pitfalls that you're going to come across. Really made that first roll well. And I knocked it out of the park. I mean, quotas were blown, accelerators were all there. And people were like, wait, we should do this, hire people that have done, that we actually changed our contract to say, because you're probably familiar with this, most contract or terms of services agreements say that you can't hire away, somebody from the person that you're selling the software to. We actually removed that clause from our software because we wanted to hire people that had implemented the product.
How about the sales side of it, though? I mean, you getting the technical sale,
Sure.
but then
The
there's
actual
the business
relationship, yeah. That took a little learning, right? Because I could go one-to-one with the technical buyer. But when it got to the C level and the executive level, that took a little learning to develop. And thankfully I had a really, really strong mentor, somebody that had just gone through an exit for, he built a house out in Colorado, had the sports car, all that sort of stuff. So he was very successful, and he taught me quite a bit about that relationship, the selling aspect of things, how a deal is done, how a deal isn't done, who all the key stakeholders are in a deal, and that sort of thing, to help me sort of navigate and get through that. So thankfully I had a great mentor.
And was there anybody internally that could help you, do peer-to-peer selling? Or
so when I started, we were kind of I was employee number 9 at this company.
What are the other 8 doing all day?
Well, the other 8 were developing the product, right? The other 7 at least. So there were kind of 2 people selling. So no, you when I think about it now, a big company wouldn't necessarily take a chance on somebody that had no sales experience, right?
Right.
I mean, they just had technology experience. You take one of the top 3 in my space in software security, all names you're familiar with, right? They would probably look at me and be like, okay, maybe we can make you a sales engineer, or something along those natures. It took kind of that smaller company that was growing, that had implemented that product, to help me bridge that gap that I needed to fill from a personal ability perspective.
And how about the very first part of it? Were you getting inbound, or did you have
So
to
thankfully, because we were new and in a space that was growing, we were getting quite a bit of inbound. We also did, my first year, I think we did 88 events. This was when you could go do events in person and that sort of thing. So, work in a booth, all that sort of stuff. I think my second year we did 122 events. I literally had a Pelican case that I would check at the airport, and the airport's people knew me because it was a 75-pound Pelican case that I would just schlep and throw up on the flight, and they'd be like, "Oh, Aaron, you're here again." Charge me the oversized baggage fee, and I would be gone every weekend, sort of generating the buzz.
Yeah. And clearly you found they worked for you.
We did. Yeah. They did. It worked.
It must have been tiny or small events given the number of them.
Exactly. Yep. Yeah. The regional events, there were the big ones that came up every now and again, but those are few and far between, like once a quarter that you have those huge industry conferences where everyone goes to. What I learned, though, at those conferences was kind of one of the beautiful things about those conferences, and what I do now today. Well, if we had those conferences, what I would be doing today is the perimeter companies are the ones to keep an eye on, because they're all the small fledgling ones like I was then, right? And the companies that are either going to make it, get bought, or, you won't see them at the conference again next year, sort of thing.
Yeah. And plus they kind of don't know how to market, so they go to shows.
Yep.
Or events.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And yeah, I've tried those. I just hated sitting in a booth all day.
Yeah.
It's brutal, isn't it?
It was different. Yes.
Because who comes up to you, you don't know where they are in the awareness or technology, and they might just be lonely.
Right. Looking for somebody to talk to over their coffee. Right.
Right. Or get a free pen or whatever tchotchke you're giving out.
I call those the trick-or-treaters. Yeah. There's always the trick-or-treaters, right? They come with their bag and they're just like, hey, give me whatever you're giving. And I train my staff to just give them and go. Don't engage in a conversation. But
and what were some of the key distinctions or lessons that you learned when you got into sales?
Well, first thing that I learned, and I learned this relatively early, is get the no, right? mean, NO, right? Get the no, get the no early. Because what I found was no matter the size of the deal, you tended to spend the same amount of time working the deal, right? So this isn't always true, right? Some enterprise deal takes months, and contracts and procurement and legal and all those sorts of things just spread out the transaction. But from my perspective, the amount of work that I was doing, often the list of things that I would do for the pre-sales, for the technology POC, for that sort of stuff was often the same. Yeah. Right? So I could either operate doing lots of little deals, right? Medium-sized deals, or big deals, right? But regardless, I would spend them 80% of the time, I would spend the same amount of time doing that work. So I had to make certain that I got the no quickly, because I wouldn't want to do all that work, right? And realize, oh my goodness, you know, this deal's not going anywhere. It's not going to go anywhere. Yeah.
And when you say no, is no mean it's not a match? It's no, these are the wrong people within a company, they'll never get it done, or we're just experimenting, we want to learn from you?
You know, probably a little bit of everything, but basically no right now, right? That wouldn't mean in 6 months or end of year budget season, I wouldn't come back and say, hey, you remember when we did this evaluation, did you want to continue? 60, 70% of the times the answer would still be no, right? Or it would be, we moved forward with something else, right? People are sometimes hesitant to tell you that, something.
They tell you long after it's been decided.
Right,
typically.
right.
And were you looking for the overt no or the covert no?
Overt. I learned to get the overt no. Not you know, kind of poking and being annoying, but really asking the right set of questions. We ended up creating kind of this qualification document, and what we at my company now have created what's called the ICP, Ideal Customer Profile.
Yeah.
Right. Ideally, these 10 criteria weighted with a certain category make the ideal customer, right? Yeah. And so when you go through kind of qualifying questions, not a checklist, not like, hey, do you do this? Do you have this? Do you have what? I mean, at that point,
do you have budget?
Right. Right. When you do that, you know, you're not being a partner at all. But we've built this, and I've maintained this at all the companies that I've been through, and it works really well. Just identifying if this is the right fit, because you don't want to waste the buyer's time as well. They're busy, they have things to do. And if this isn't something that isn't going to bring value to them, let them go, let them do their job, let them do their thing.
And how long did it take you to kind of figure that out? Was that a 3, 6 month, 9 month thing?
So the good news is, like I mentioned, I had a great mentor, and he brought that to me relatively early, which is what contributed to my success that first year. Yeah. And subsequent years after that. I was at that organization for 5 or 6 years. Him helping teach me that kind of the master and the apprentice sort of thing. Jim was his name. Jim teaching me that was truly a value that I couldn't get anywhere else or as quickly, right? So it was kind of that quarter or two sort of thing where I learned, oh, this is what he's saying. He knows what he's talking about. Yeah, I should implement what these seasoned vets are telling me.
Right, because usually, you know, when you first get into sales, when you hear or you engage with a client that asks questions, that takes your meetings, that gives you time, that shows interest, you get a false positive. Those are some good symptoms. But can I really solve their issue?
Right.
And is that issue big enough for them to give me money for?
Right.
And
very much the case.
Yeah. And it usually takes a while that we waste 6 months with a client, and then they go, yeah, my CEO didn't value this, or he doesn't care, or this is next year's issue.
Yep. And that sort of education, right, where you're educating the client on the space is one of those examples where you want to get that no early. Yeah. Because you're spending a lot of time, you know, on something that either the client should already know about, or the problem should already exist and the pain point should already be there, so that you can help alleviate that.
How about, like, I always look for the covert no as well.
Okay.
where the person, it's just false positive. Either
Sure.
they're the basement scientist who could talk about technology all day long, but
Right.
nobody really respects or values his opinion, and or
Yep.
it's not attached to a business problem that money would get to, or they're really scared of telling their managers about it and giving it visibility.
Very much so. You see that frequently.
Right.
Frequently.
Yeah. Because like you see with marketers, the people who download the ebook, they're interested in the ebook, not
Correct.
necessarily have the problem or care about the product.
Yeah, they want something to read on the plane or at night,
They want to
or
learn.
just
Yeah.
just be educated. Yeah. Yeah.
How about like the things like outside of the technology, like justifying the purchase? Because I'm sure it was a large dollar amount.
Average sales price at the time was kind of 30 to 40K. Obviously that crept up, and we got into the 6-figure deals. So not huge, which also made it nice to be able to be kind of light and float under the radar of certain signing or budget criteria. But time after time, I don't know if you're finding this, but regional sales were dependent, regional pricing was dependent, meaning a sale in New York City versus a sale in Chicago versus a sale in Miami versus a sale in Columbus, Ohio. There were different appetites for budgets according to certain, the value of what this sort of software could bring. And so having a meeting in New York City at a, Wall Street financial, throwing out a number like, 30, 40,000 was like, okay. Versus, a company in Columbus, Ohio, whoa, 30 to 40,000. What are you talking about here? Right. So we had to tend to learn that. And I ended up building out a team that had people, kind of covering those regions. And it was interesting to see kind of how pricing played out there.
Yeah. And how about as far as, you personally, what motivated you?
So I'm not coin operated. That's a term that I've heard thrown around by a lot of people in sales, like I'm coin operated, right? And all about the incentive, right?
Here's the slide.
Yeah, you give me the commission check, and I'm yours. That's not me, actually. Funny thing, my last name actually means helper. And be that as it may, or take that to mean what it is, but I actually like helping and solving people's problems. And that seems disingenuous, and that seems so convenient and used car salesman like at times. But it's actually genuinely the truth. I became a computer scientist and an engineer because I liked solving problems, right? I liked creating programs and applications that built code to solve a problem. And I kind of use that same mentality with the way that we approach sales and customers today. Is we build a relationship and we help you solve a problem. And I'm not going to show up and then be back 365 days later and be like, oh, hey, come back for the renewal, right? You had a podcast about this just a few weeks ago. We're building that relationship, right? We're setting touch points. We're in communication with the customer to the point where we actually truly become that partner. And when I see what ends up happening is growth at the account, right? There's more products, there's more value that we can bring, there's more people that we can introduce. And that's organic. It's not forced. And it's not, because I'm trying to force the sale. So what motivates me, what I look to see motivate my team is kind of that partnership and the problem solving rather than, just getting that commission and moving on.
Right. But there's also, you could do that without winning. You could go help a bunch of people, right?
Yeah.
You can adopt dogs. You can do, right? There's a lot of ways to fulfill that need.
Yeah. I mean, there is a certain satisfaction that comes in winning a deal, right? Yeah. That comes as part of that, certainly.
Right. And when I don't see that, I don't see people, either the desire to win or the hatred of losing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's good I'm very glad that you pointed out the dichotomy there, right? Desire to win, hatred of losing, because there's definitely a difference. There is a desire to win in me. Sure, losing stings, but I take losing as a lesson that needs to be learned and a step that needs to be improved on our part that we can now bring to the next customer or the next prospect. There certainly is that desire to win, right? You can, in sales, you can actually quantify how successful you are, right? By like, look, I won X deals. And I know you say once something becomes a metric, it becomes, something that fails to become valuable. I think, in quantified sales, that's something that you can easily say, look, this is how successful I am. And it's that desire to win that helps there.
Yeah, because without that, you get a lot of nice people,
right?
Not accomplishing a whole lot.
Sure.
And it has to kind of grow exponentially as you get into the deal, how much you care about the deal.
Agreed.
Like at the beginning, you can't
not
care
very
a lot,
much, right? Yeah, exactly.
They're not a fit, they don't show up, whatever. It's like you can't lose sleep over that. At the very end, you got to care a lot.
Yeah, agreed. That's a very good way to put it.
Yeah. And what I found, because I've seen a lot of people transition from either engineering or pre-sales into sales, and it takes a while for them to get that emotional connection to it.
Very much so. Yeah.
And I've beaten up pre-sales people who didn't have that. When they shrug their shoulders, oh, we lost.
Right.
Like, no. That just cost you a year at Harvard.
Right.
Learn that lesson.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. The desire to win certainly is something that was cultivated and developed as well. Yeah. And the beauty of that is the more that you win, the more you want to win, right? Like it's almost, kind of like a snowball effect. The more success that you get, the better that you are, the better your performance, the sharper you feel, and the more confidence that you get.
Yes.
Kind of that imposter syndrome that people have seen sometimes have.
And technical people tend to do pattern recognition better.
Agreed. Yeah. This worked. I'm going to do that again.
Yeah.
This worked. I'm going to do that again. Right.
Where you have your heuristic of what makes a great customer and what it turns into judgment.
Sure.
Which is the superpower, right?
Exactly. When you can predict and say, now I should plug in, or now I should pitch and go.
Yeah. Right. Because time is zero-sum game. You can't get more. And if you spend it on, a 5%er instead of a 80%er,
right,
you lose.
Exactly. Which goes back to that point about, no matter how much time you spent in a deal, you want to make certain that you put that time on the right deal. Right. And so getting that judgment and being able to calculate, this is a deal that I want to focus my time on versus, that's not something I need to focus on.
How long did it take you to feel at home in sales?
Wow. Does one ever feel at home in sales? No, I'm just kidding. I am always learning, right? I'm taking and adapting and getting better, but it probably was the better part of a few years. I ended up making, club and, being the number one performer at my organization, number one, number two, always on the podium, time and time again. And I think, year after year, when you do that and you accomplish that, like I said, that imposter syndrome kind of goes away, and your ability to recognize that you're successful and that things are okay, or at least you can be a little bit more comfortable. I wouldn't necessarily say that I'd ever want to be to the point where I'm just kind of sitting back and on cruise control, because if that's the case, then I'm not learning and the market's changing all around me, and I have to be as up to date, if not more up to date, on what's happening at my customers in that market than they are.
But there's like that state, that flow state that you get certainly as an engineer when you get used to a product.
You're in the zone, right? Like
in the zone.
Yeah.
Where
I'd say it took a couple of years, right, to kind of get there. Maybe a year and some change. But like I said, we did really, really well, and we were very successful for a long time. And that was in part because of the great team, but also because of the confidence and the sort of value that we brought.
How about, did you notice kind of like that there's a difference because when people come to you, like when you're in pre-sales or engineer, people come to you. You don't go out and seek people typically.
as a customer or as a
vendor.
employee. Okay. Yeah, absolutely. Right. Inbound versus a warm lead versus something that's outbound or cold. Right.
Yeah. How did you deal with kind of like, because you probably didn't get much rejection as an engineer.
No, not at all. Good point. So, hearing and thinking, sitting there and internalizing, why don't you understand what I'm trying to convey to you? Like, this is something that can help you. Why don't you understand that? Some people are just going to be like, no, I don't want to buy. I see you as the enemy, not necessarily, but you know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
I see you as something that's not going to add value to my life. And so a couple of things there. One, don't take it personally, right? It's some people just aren't going to like you. Some people aren't going to like your technologies. It's just a fact, right? And so that didn't take long to get used to because we were just having so many discussions and we had so much, we were just so busy that it almost just kind of became, okay, I've got 10 other people that I need to talk to. So, I was in a very good position to be able to say that rather than, to have a calendar that was empty all week and, have one bright spot on a Wednesday afternoon and to hear them say, no, my calendar was booked 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. almost every day.
And for the people out there who have a technical background, who are considering sales, what coaching would you give them? What advice?
This is funny. I actually gave a talk on this at a conference and it said, my journey to the dark side. Just kind of joking, right? Saying that sales was the dark side of things to people. And it was almost an hour talk at this conference. And I still go back and look at it and I believe what I said. And what I said there was, it's not for everyone. And the meaning is, as you've alluded to in these questions that you've asked me, some engineers want to do things just via checklist. Some engineers have never been told no. Some engineers have never had success. Some engineers don't want to win. Some engineers don't care if they lose, right? So there's a lot of criteria that are unique to selling, right? And so the first thing I said kind of in that conference or in that talk was, look, this isn't for everyone. This isn't something that you could do. The second thing I said is you'll know already, like you already know when you're sitting in these meetings and you're looking at the software and you're evaluating these companies, you already know if you could do a better job, right? And so listen to that feeling and see if there's something that you can do to cultivate it, because you can do what I did, right? You can sell this internally. You need to get your CEO or your CTO or your CIO to buy off on this software, right? Odds are you're not the decision maker. If you can take something and sell it internally, then that could be an indicator that you can take something and sell it, externally to other people, right? And so that's what I did. I evaluated product after product, and time after time, I would say, yeah, I should do this. No, I shouldn't do that. And when I could sell it internally and get budget and project dollars and people allocated to this sort of thing, I realized that it was something that I could do. And I tell people to look to that, because sometimes people say, oh, I want to get in sales. I want those big commission checks and blah, blah, blah. And I'll say, great. What was the last project that you championed? Well, I've never championed a project. That's selling.
It is, yeah.
Can you sell something internally?
And
so those are
like to do that.
Right. Yeah. And do you want to do that? Oh, that's too much work. I don't want to do that. Well, guess what?
Oh, they don't get it.
Right.
Well, if you settle for they don't get it, you'll never succeed in sales.
Correct.
It's your job for them to get it.
Yep. Absolutely.
Hey, this has been a fun conversation. Where can people go to connect and follow you?
Sure. I've got a LinkedIn page, Aaron Ansari on LinkedIn. And then on our company website for Trend Micro, I've also got a page for my Cloud One product there.